Let's go ahead and do the rest of the intro. So hi everybody, this is that girl Connor. Welcome to another episode of the simulation today. First things first, most important thing, mug of the day and tea of the day. So with my tea today is mango lychee black tea. I guess I actually don't know if it's black tea or not. I assume it is, but I don't know. When we buy the tea that we buy, I told you guys I drink tea like every morning in a couple videos ago. So when I buy the tea that I do buy, it comes with these like little baggies of other tea in it, and I wanted something a little lighter. This mango lychee tea is really delicious, and I actually really quite enjoy it iced. And then this cute little mug, it's actually huge. When we moved into this apartment, we had to go shopping for some like toilet, just like regular stuff that you need. Moving sucks because there's always stuff that you forget that you need, like dish towels and like toothpaste, toothbrush holders, and you know, every apartment is like a little bit different, and so you don't always know what you're gonna need and stuff like that. So I got this beautiful painted cow mug, and I really love it, but it was like $5, and Aaron was like, you have to get rid of other mugs, because we have, like, the two of us just have a ton of mugs. I can't tell if this is in frame or not, but Anna got me this beautiful thing when she came to visit, and I just wanted to have it in frame, but I don't think it is, and I didn't want it to look weird, but I did want to show it off. So thank you, Anna. So without further ado, I guess I'm just gonna jump right into the video. Like I mentioned, I just wanted my perspective out onto the YouTube space. It's something I actually care quite a bit, especially how people on YouTube and TikTok and stuff like that are really weaponizing religion. So just a little bit about me, so you know. I studied religious studies at college, and I actually was going to major in it, and I wanted to. Unfortunately, I had like a pretty rough semester, and there was a class that I like needed to take that it didn't work out, and that class wouldn't have been offered again until after I graduated. And the way my scholarship worked out at McDaniel, that wasn't going to be a possibility for me to stay just to take it. I continued to take religious studies classes, and I took that class, so I have all the content. I just never got the major, and maybe one day I'll go back when I just have millions of dollars from YouTube. I'll go back and get the major. And that class, I think, did a lot also to help open my mind to things. But I guess I just want you guys to know that I've like studied most of this stuff, and most of the stuff I studied is from like a context of Christianity. I grew up in the U.S., obviously, and the U.S., despite its best efforts, is very much a Christian country, and it sucks in a lot of ways, but that's obviously the thing that I've been most exposed to in my life. So just to start, my parents raised me Episcopalian. For those of you who don't know what that means, Episcopalian is a sect of Protestantism. And so just to provide like a little bit of context here, there are a few genres of Christian religion. We have the concept of like Orthodoxy, so typically like you know, over Easter a lot of people were posting that they were like celebrating Greek Easter. So you know, there are Orthodox churches, and they tend to have, you know, a different calendar and stuff like that. I don't know a ton about Orthodoxy, but it's separate. It's like a different thing outside of like Catholicism or Protestantism. And so then we have Catholicism, which is like I guess you could say the OG Christianity, and they have some very specific belief systems that tend to differ in Protestant faiths. So Catholicism's one of their major beliefs is the belief in the Pope, and the Pope comes from where the Pope has like a direct relationship to God, comes from St. Peter, who when he died, you know, was the first Pope, got all that information from God, and with it became kind of secret traditional things that were maybe lost in between the death of Christ and the start of the Catholic Church that were like bestowed upon St. Peter or St. Paul. I wasn't Catholic, and passed on throughout the generations. And so the Pope is the head of the diocese or the hierarchy in the Catholic Church. Things come from the Pope. Other big beliefs in the Catholic Church is the concept of transubstantiation, which is the belief that during the Eucharist, it's not a symbolic representation of the Last Supper. It is, in fact, Jesus's body and blood, very like Holy the Holy Spirit is present there. And when you are ingesting it, you are taking in some of the Holy Spirit. And there's lots of other beliefs, I think, that are also there. Also like sainthood and saints, not as ever present in Protestant faiths. But nonetheless, a major part of Catholic faith. And again, that's there too. So then we have Protestantism, which, quite famously comes from Martin Luther's 95 Theses, where he was really rejecting the Catholic churches at the time, representation essentially of like the Pharisees. Most, I think, notably were like protesting against the concept of indulgences, which were kind of essentially like payments that were getting people out of going to hell. So Martin Luther posted the 95 Theses, and rather than reform happening to the Catholic Church, he ended up having to section off and creating a belief, another type of Christianity, which is Christianity, or Protestantism is really any sect of Christianity that isn't Catholicism or like Orthodoxy. So we have Lutheranism, we have Baptists, Anabaptists, Episcopalians, Anglicans, Presbyterians, even like the Puritans and the Calvinists from like back in the 1700s, those would fall under Protestant place. And then you also have groups like Mormons and Amish and Mennonites and Seventh-day Adventists, and all those people are and Jehovah's Witnesses, all those people are technically Protestant. But I feel like even in making that list, you guys notice I listed people that are kind of like, that's kind of like generic Christian, and then people that have very specific sets of beliefs that are, I would say, separate than Protestants. Now, this is just my own personal thought. We should really make another category that is like evangelical, or just like very specific. So like, I don't know if I would put Amish people and Mennonites in the evangelical category, but it also seems weird to put them in the Protestant category because they have additional belief systems that are pretty separate from Protestantism. And Protestants tend to not really believe in transubstantiation, not really believe in the concept of saints, promote a more individualized relationship with God and Jesus. And then they have different things along the way. So what I grew up in is Episcopalian, which is honestly like Catholic light in a lot of ways. We like to joke because King Henry VIII started the English Church as a breakaway from the Pope, because essentially he wanted to stop beheading all of his wives for not giving him babies. So he wanted to be able to divorce his wives. So we have like a diocese, we have cardinals, we don't have a Pope, but in a lot of sense we have a lot of similar stuff to Catholicism. We don't believe in transubstantiation, and we don't believe in saints. And we use the King Henry or the King James version of the Bible. So, that's like a little history breakdown of like that. And then, like I said, you could make the argument, and I think it's a worthwhile argument, that we should really add another section of identifying Christians, and evangelicals should really be their own section, because they tend to believe, it's an interesting thing, because to me evangelicals are people that tend to have, or evangelical faiths tend to represent less rigid hierarchies but more dogmatic faiths, faiths that seem to have a strong rejection of Catholicism and a strong rejection of like diocese and stuff like that, but a very dogmatic faith that is weird, because to me it's odd, because it doesn't seem to be coming from any like higher group of people. And like, it's weird to me that a collective group of people all are individually coming to their own conclusion, but that's just my own personal belief, so my own personal thoughts on that. So I don't want to get too bogged down in it, and I'm just trying to present this overview, so when I discuss these terms, there's not like what does that mean? It's like, I've defined terms here. Maybe I'll go ahead and define more, but that's really what I would say we can use as a breakdown, and then I will talk more terms later. So I grew up Episcopal in a church that my mom and I love to call Our Lady Behind the Sunoco in my hometown. Episcopalianism split off into a more conservative and a more liberal sect, and we were part of a more liberal sect. So I grew up with a woman rector. I grew up being able to serve on the altar. I grew up with queer people in my congregation, and we even, before gay marriage was legalized, we were blessing gay marriages within the church, and we even had like a trans member of our church community. So I grew up around that. I also grew up with parents who were incredibly involved in the church. So both my parents were Sunday school teachers. Both my parents served on the vestry, which is something my church had, which was like 12 elected people from the congregation who helped help our rector make decisions, come up with ideas, stuff like that. Actually, now that I think about it, I'm not really exactly sure what they did, but they had to go to meetings and I'm sure help make big church decisions, and they were elected by the congregation. So for, I would say up until I was in high school, it was like, maybe we were on it for like 2 or 3 years, but my parents kept taking turns doing it. Like I said, they both acolyted, and my family, I started acolyting when I was 8 all the way through all of high school. I went to set church like basically every Sunday, and I acolyted especially over the summer for a lot of those Sundays. When our rector retired after 25 years, my mom was on the committee that helped find us an additional, a new rector for the church. They helped plan events. My parents were just incredibly involved. And so I was involved too. And I think this is why I personally get so upset when a lot of dogmatic creator, like YouTube Christian kind of influencers and creators, you got like your Paulin Morgans and you got your Girl Defined, but also individuals. I think they really make bold statements that are just not true. Like bold statements where you're just an atheist because you hate the church, or you had a bad experience. I, for the most part, had a pretty decent experience going to church. It was something that my family was involved in. And honestly, Episcopalianism is like a pretty easy religion to get along with. It wasn't like growing up through high school and stuff like that. I had major questions about things. I wasn't really entrenched in purity culture in my church. I didn't have to pledge my virginity to anybody. And the church that I grew up with, like I said, was supportive of LGBTQ rights. It was supportive of women, which was like a big thing. And additionally, really supportive of not having direct answers. And also we never grew up also thinking the Bible was like literal. That was not something I was taught. So these were all things that were not big issues in my religious indoctrination, because I wasn't worried about what the 7th-day story meant, right? The Genesis story. It was always like, well, 7 days could mean days, or it could mean, like God is an omnipresent being. So like, what is really time to him? Also, they created the concept of time. So what does that even mean? Like it was never like my religion was in contradiction to science. It wasn't really in contradiction to my social beliefs. It wasn't in any of that stuff. But that's not to say that I wasn't ever frustrated at church. I was frustrated because we always had to go. But I think we went to a church that had like a really small congregation, and I felt sometimes like my family got the brunt of the work, especially because there was like 2 summers that we like volunteered to take care of the entire landscape of the church. I felt like people were constantly not showing up for acolyting, and I was there, so like I would have to do it. And maybe that's a little bit of me being an obnoxious teenager, and maybe that's like a real frustration that I'm allowed to have. But I also felt guilty for having that, because I was like, but I'm doing good things. I'm serving God. I'm helping the church. Like, these are good things to do. But I still was 13 and did not want to be mowing my church lawn. But again, none of that really matters. I actually want to talk about one of my favorite aspects of my my entire church career, my entire religious understanding, was when I got to be in high school Sunday school, which is like the thing you got to do. You got to go up to this room upstairs, not downstairs like everybody else, and you got to sit on these like big, comfy, old ass, probably very gross couches, and you just talked. You just got to talk about how you felt about certain things. And I remember we had so many lessons on forgiveness and grace and what it means to be a good person, and we did have a couple conversations on like living together before marriage and what that really means. But I distinctively remember the forgiveness lesson like more than I remember any of the like, I don't remember having a conversation about sex before marriage, like, as a lesson that was bad. It was just a conversation. And everybody got to talk about their own thoughts and talk about their own feelings, which honestly, as a 15-year-old, that is so great. That an adult that you respect in your community is just like, okay, what do you think? And why do you think that way? And have you ever thought it this way? And what does your friend think? And let's talk about it and experience it. And honestly, I really credit those 4 years of my life with part of what has solidified the part of my personality where I always think it's better to talk about something. It's better to express your ideas. It's okay to express your ideas, because I was never taught otherwise. And I even had a space once a week where I got to go to where that was the case. And what was even better was every other year you did the same lesson. So you were expected to have your answers change and grow, or your understanding grow and change. I felt like I went to a church that embraced change, embraced youth, embraced ideas and conversations, and was okay with saying we don't know the answer. And that's part of the great thing. And I liked that. I genuinely was having a good time in the church I grew up in. But at the same time, I was interacting with people that very clearly were having different ideas about faith. And I think specifically it was really my cousin's understanding of faith that affected me more than like my friends. My family was more religious, I would say, than a lot of the people I was interacting with at the very least, with our involvement with the church. Maybe not so much in our, like, what would have been considered our beliefs and what we talked about, but with our involvement in the church, we were very clearly more involved than like a lot of my friends in middle school and honestly, definitely high school. But my cousins were different. My dad grew up Missouri Lutheran, which is a type of Protestantism that is pretty much, it's significantly more dogmatic than the religion I grew up with. More, not supportive of LGBTQ people, questioning, very much purity culture inclined. And I think it was being exposed to these things and going to this church when I would go visit my cousins and just realizing, and also they believe in transubstantiation. So it was a big deal. I wasn't allowed to take communion there, and I never understood why. And also my church doesn't do first communion because our rector always cited that story in the Bible where God or where Jesus doesn't turn away the kids. And so she's like, I will never do that either. And it's so interesting to see what not only individual faiths focus on, but what individual rectors really take heed with to implement in their church and implement in their community, because she always was very, I think, wanted kids to come and wanted to engage children, even if she didn't necessarily always have the best way to do it. But it was experiencing religion and experiencing people that I was very close to with, who we both identified as Christians, but also very clearly had incredibly different understandings of faith and belief. And I think I took a lot of issue with it. Now, this is also where I think part of this is I took a lot more issue with it the older I got, because I think I was questioning my own queer identity. Those who don't know, I identify as bisexual, and I feel like, and I am bisexual, right? At the time, I had a high school boyfriend, and I was very much like, I will never date anybody else. We're going to get married. So I think I was struggling internally with validation of being a bi woman, but also being with a man and never having been with a woman in that scenario. But also knowing what would happen if I did come out, not necessarily to my parents, but my extended family, and feeling very frustrated because, one, I wasn't ready to admit fully to myself, but I was incredibly emotional when I was interacting with these family members, and frustrated because I just felt like it was, and I couldn't put my finger on it. I couldn't figure out why it upset me so much until later when I fully admitted to myself, and I admitted that I was, once you accept yourself, it's a lot easier to see your reactions and a lot of different things and how that was your own internalized whatever it is. And that doesn't necessarily make it okay, but it certainly does shed some light to why things were so hard for me and why I cared so much about stuff. Because I think I constantly was trying to bring it out, especially to my mom, about how I was like, well, if I was gay, you know, like, how can we all sit here and say they're Christians and people have very conflicting ideas of it? Like, if it's so simple, shouldn't it be so simple? Why are we fighting about it? And, you know, I think that was part of like my upbringing in the church that I was brought up in, where it's like, you're allowed to have questions. You're allowed to go through phases where you're mad at God, if you're questioning God, if you don't think they aren't making good choices. You know, it's a very different understanding of God than I even see represented by like people like Girl Defined and Paul and Morgan and all these people. Because to be honest with you, so many people that I know that are in this evangelical faith thing believe in a God that is so petty and so small and so myopic. I mean, that fucking woman who was like talking about how God doesn't want us to wear masks. I mean, these people believe in a God that is just, even if I believed in God, that just wouldn't be the God that I would want to believe in. I wouldn't want to believe he would care, or they would care about things that are so myopic and so small and so ignore the big picture. And I think that's really where the breakdown and my questioning started to happen. I will also say this. I was really frustrated when I got confirmed in my church. So I got confirmed my freshman year of high school. And I was frustrated because I was getting confirmed with two other boys that had gone to church with me for like a majority of my life, but hadn't really been there often. And I really felt like I was like, it's not fair that I'm here every Sunday acolyting, doing all this stuff, and these kids don't have to do anything to get confirmed. And, you know, part of that was like a pride thing, but I also was pretty frustrated just about that, because it used to be a requirement in the church that you had to do some stuff, and it seemed to me like they weren't going to have to do it. But I think what really started to frustrate me is when we were going through the confirmation classes. First of all, we had to change the time to accommodate somebody else's schedule so that they could attend youth group at like another church, when the change in time upset like my ice skating lesson, I think it was. So we had to like change my ice skating lesson time, and it also messed up my schedule, but seemingly that didn't matter. And then what really got to me was like, I was ready. I had been going to church my whole life. I had been going to Sunday school. I had questions. I wanted answers. I wanted to have these philosophical, in-depth discussions with the rector, like one-on-one time with the rector. But no, these two kids that never paid attention in church and maybe came to Sunday school once a month. The other one came like, one of the kids came like maybe once a month. The other one came like maybe 3 times a month, fine, whatever. Just, I was like, why am I reviewing the history of the Episcopal Church? I already know this. I already know about King Henry VIII. I want to know about the concept of like predestination. How involved do you think God is in our lives? And what does it mean that like the plan that God created for Jesus? Because like, doesn't that mean that like he kind of knew about, you know, Judas and how Judas would betray Jesus, which means there is some level of like predetermination in the world? Or did Judas really have the free will to say no? And if Judas said no, who would have betrayed him? Or was it always meant to be Judas? Like, I was ready to have these discussions, because while we don't take the Bible literally, obviously in Episcopalianism, in the faith that I grew up in, I felt like that was a big plot hole, to be honest with you, because we also don't believe in predestination. Lots of modern faiths don't really believe in the concept of predestination, modern Christian faiths, but I was really ready to have these conversations. Even if they didn't result in an answer, I was ready to have questions, and I was ready to bring them to light. I was ready to discuss them. I was ready to discuss them with somebody who studied. We had to like dumb it down for these two kids that never even fucking went to church. And honestly, thinking about it, I'm still kind of bitter, because I wish I had said something more to my parents, because I honestly think they maybe would have said something to my rector, because I think they thought that I was justified in my frustration, to be honest with you. But I guess that's like neither here nor there. But like I said, what really started it was like, once I got to an older level, I would say maybe like my junior year in high school, I had more questions. I also was really questioning mostly like my cousins, because I just had a hard time believing we were cut from the same cloth in this like belief system, but they were so different and we both were so convinced that we were right. And I was coming to start to question this idea of like, if I was born somewhere else, would I believe that what I grew up believing was true? Because, you know, if I had moved, like my cousins lived like up in upstate New York and I lived outside of Philadelphia. So I felt kind of like, well, if we had moved there when I was in first grade, like we were supposed to, or if I went up there or my parents never moved, and or if I grew up in Pakistan, or if I grew up in California, or if I grew up in Taiwan, like would I believe what I was taught to believe wholeheartedly? And I don't think I could lie to myself and say absolutely not. I would always find God. I would always find the truth, because I'd always been taught that this was the truth, right? I always thought this was the truth. So we all believe as much as possible that we are following the right thing and we are believing the truth. And I think it only comes with introspection and understanding that, like, I don't know if we know what inherent truth is. So I'm in like my senior year of high school. I don't like talking about religion. It makes me very upset. I think I'm hiding myself from my own queer identity. And I'm just frustrated, and I think I'm losing a little bit of my own personal faith, because again, to be honest with you, I never had like a huge individual relationship with God. And also what I loved about church and my religion was my church specifically, and like my Sunday school class and the small community I had. I didn't love God. I just liked him, I guess. And I was frustrated because I thought, you know, if it was supposed to be so easy and clear, why don't you let it be so easy and clear? Why are we constantly being tested in our own understanding of faith by somebody who wants us to know him? It just seems weird to me. I went to college and I got assigned to this class called Religion and the Earth. And I was very upset because I said I didn't want to be in any religious classes, but they still put me in this class. For my first year seminar. And honestly, I loved it. The class was incredibly interesting. It talked all about how we use religion to justify our relationship to the earth and how it has negatively affected the past for a lot of time. And it was a really great, interesting class, and I loved it. And from that class, the next semester or the next school year, I was inspired by it, and I took Introduction to Religious Studies. And that was the first like theory class I took, and I love that class. I think in that class I addressed some of my own biases that I still had, even though I probably would have said by that point I was agnostic or deist. That was like a thing I was doing for a while. Deism is the belief that a lot of our founding fathers had, where God is kind of like a watchmaker, where they put the earth into action and then haven't really interfered since. They're letting it play out. And that was kind of a comforting belief to have, because you still get to believe in a higher power and you still get to look there when you have things that can't be answered. But you also don't have to do a lot of the complicated belief stuff of like, oh, like why is God killing kids and why is God letting people starve and all that. We're letting ourselves do that. Humans are the curse of humanity, honestly, but whatever. But I realized in that class how much I still was making my own justifications for Christianity, and specifically like my understanding of Christianity. And I think that class was like a crash course in growth for me. I think it's also important to note here that McDaniel College, where I went to college, is reductionist in its religious education philosophy. So you're not, and reductionist, like Impressionism and like Gothic, is actually a term that was used by a critic. But what it really stands to say is that you aren't there to figure out if it's true. You're there to study the religion and reduce it to its human causes and its human causes, so why this might be the belief system, and then also how the humans use it when they interact now. Which, to be honest with you, is significantly more easy, and it's significantly more interesting than trying to figure out if something's true or not. Because, to be honest with you, truth is in so many ways subjective, And I'll talk a little bit more about that when I talk about this video that I want to talk about. But truth in a lot of ways is much more subjective, and it's a lot easier to see the human impacts and the human spice that they're putting into religion. And rather than passing judgment about whether you think something is true or not, you get to look at how it affects reality. And from that class, I took more religious studies classes, and the class that I loved the most was critical religion and thought. And that class was by far the most interesting class, one of my favorite classes I took in all of college. And I also took more generic religion classes, you know, Hinduism, Buddhism, African American religious history, Christian, like just like some of the history of Christianity. One of my most favorite classes that I ever took was Religion in American Prison, which takes us through the study of how really prisoners have so little freedoms now, except for freedom of religion. And so conservative religious institutions have actually taken it upon themselves to provide resources for prisoners, absolutely violating a lot of rights in doing so, but they're the only ways that prisoners are getting access to like education and reformation programs and like therapy. And so you don't want to take away these things from prisoners, these opportunities, but you also know that these things can be damaging. And the contract with America, and it's such an interesting class. And actually my favorite professor in college taught that class, and he just read a book called, and it got published, called Spiritual Entrepreneurs. And I would love if you guys would be interested in it, doing like a read through of it, but also if you guys just want to read it, I recommend. I've only read the first portion of it, but I would love to do a read through of it with you guys. But I think that it was in taking these classes and honestly seeing how much religion and different belief systems are shaped by different humans at the time and place. It really boiled down to me that I don't really know if I could make the argument that anything is more true than anything else, just because I believe it, because I feel that it's true. And this is the thing that really gets me about these evangelical kind of Christian influencers, is they're constantly telling people the way to prove their faith is to completely immerse themselves in the faith and never give them a second to think about anything else. And that's 1,000% how you're going to indoctrinate yourself. So yeah, you will, I'm sure, end up believing that it's true, and you will no longer question it because you're not giving yourself space to question it. You're not giving yourself space to hear another person's point of view, understand another person. And I find it so negative, and I find it so harmful. So many of these people promote incredibly harmful teachings, and I think mostly about why people leave religion. And for me, it's taken a while of just being agnostic and questioning, but really seeing the damage that a lot of religious people have done to other people in the name of their religion. I just don't want to be associated with it. I don't want to stand by it. And honestly, I can't, because I can't know that anything is true aside from my feelings. And as Ben Shapiro likes to say, facts are not feelings. And right, of course he says it, but of course he's also really, it's just like, it's so fucking stupid. And to be honest with you, I don't necessarily care if you're religious. I care if your religion and how your religion is teaching you to interact with people is harming other people. And to be honest with you, I think some of it is. And I'm going to show you guys some right now, because I initially made this channel to react to things that are 100% purity culture, that are so ingrained in our life that we don't even recognize it as such, and we just, as a secular world, interact with it. But yeah, and I mean, I also think when I was really discovering my atheism, I would say like my senior year of college and a little bit after, I was angry. I was really angry. I really looked at anybody who believed in religion as stupid, as they couldn't see the point. And you know, it's honestly, like I said, from watching people like Nuance Ho and Zelph on the Shelf and just talking and expressing my own viewpoint, I realize I have a lot of anger directed at religion, and I don't think incorrectly. But I also have a lot of friends that are still religious, that aren't also not incredibly religious, not super serious, like, you know, but we can have conversations, and I really respect them. And I don't think that I'm any better than them because I've reached this point in my life where I just don't believe in something. And we both agree when we recognize harmful teachings of people manipulating and weaponizing their religion. And honestly, there's like, so many of these people, especially in these like evangelical influencer communities, are so about weaponizing their faith and acting like they have the one true faith and acting like this is the way it's all everything and they've always had the truth, and they just don't, because nobody can possibly have the 100% truth. And just because you feel like you have the 100% truth, so does somebody else who you absolutely disagree with, that you think is going to burn in hell. And to be honest with you, why would the God that you choose to believe in be so myopic and so rude and so careless and heartless to so many people because you feel like it's right? Fucking ridiculous. So let's go through some of my favorite, and by favorite I mean least favorite, creators and what they have to offer.
Here's a good question for you. If God takes it from you tomorrow, are you okay? If not, you found identity in it. And if you found identity in it, it's become your idol. Here's a good question for you.
Okay. First of all, what if God takes away your faith from you tomorrow? Like, what does this mean? If God takes away coffee from you tomorrow, are you okay? If God takes away your insulin, something you absolutely need to survive, and you're not okay, you found identity in it. If God takes away your children, like, what does this mean? And how is this actually applicable to your life? And how is it can't always be true, because I've already presented examples with you that are absolutely not cool. So like, you know, insulin. Again, this doesn't work if God takes away your faith tomorrow either, right? Like, you found identity in it, right? And then it's your idol, all right? What if God took away water? We literally all need water to survive, except for my stupid cat Cow, who refuses to drink water. So what if God takes away water tomorrow? And of course, places already don't currently have water, and we're not doing anything to help them about it. But sure, God takes away all of the lakes, waters, there's no water. You found identity in it. Like, what does this even mean? And what are you proving? Like, what are you trying to prove? You're really trying to say something like, if God took away your music or like TV shows, but there's no specifications here. And I just feel like it's stuff like this where it's like, you haven't proved anything, and I know that you think you're mic dropping, but you're not. This is a good one. This is a good one. I understand her point here. Her point is saying, this is from Inside the Pastor's Wife. Somebody may have hurt you in the church, but that was humanity. That wasn't the church. But the church backs up individual. I mean, I don't know what belief this woman is part of, but I think when you're like, if your whole identity on Instagram is about being the pastor's wife, what if God takes away your husband tomorrow, right? And then you're not, and then you find identity in it, right? Fucking stupid. But the point here is she's trying to make the argument that whenever you're hurt in the church, that's not from the beliefs of the church, that's from an individual human. But what if you're queer and you get sent to conversion therapy because people from your church that promote that belief system do it? It doesn't mean that the church isn't going to continue to hurt you. What if you are struggling with depression and anxiety and people go, but God tells you not to worry? That's not helpful, and it doesn't validate your mental illness, and you're not getting help for it. And because the church is promoting these belief systems, you're still going to believe that. And it doesn't matter if you keep going to church, because you're still going to have these mental illness, neurotypical activity. And people are using the teachings of the church to hurt you. Again, if it's so simple, if it's church can provide healing, what church, which church, what beliefs are we all agreeing to? And how can humans so easily take it and project it and twist it and use it to hurt other people and still feel justified in their actions, right? Let's look at more, because don't worry, I've got them. Paul is so funny because Paul just... Okay, this is a screenshot. I didn't record the video. But it says, Jesus doesn't care how you live as long as you're happy and true to yourself. And his face is like, no. Because even if you're living your true authentic self and you feel like you are happiest and you feel that you are not harming people and hurting people and all of that stuff, if it's denying the myopicness of the God that they follow, you're wrong and you're not actually happy. And imagine if people trusted Jesus as much as they trust a mask. This girl really thinks she's like dropping the mic on you and me and anybody who wore a mask, because she believes, I guess, that if Jesus wanted to protect her, he would, and if he didn't, he'll let her die. Like, what are you even saying here? You can believe and trust both. What? These people are really damaging because I think they really take it upon themselves to make people feel bad for feeling worried or untrustful or scared, because they live in a world where scary things happen because people weaponize their religion to hurt you. And just, she's so bad at being a cat, honey. That was embarrassing. And justify, like truly justify hurting people through the name of Jesus Christ. It's embarrassing. Oh, I love the Christian. I love Christian.
When the government or society tells you to change your beliefs to line up with theirs, don't budge. Hold on to the truth in Scripture. Biblical Christianity is the one that's going to be persecuted, and when there's persecution, there will always be greater breakthrough. Revival will come. The government will try to make the church do things that are not biblical, and if the church doesn't comply, I believe the government will ask the church to close down. But take heart from the words of Jesus Christ. Jesus says, "Blessed are the Christian."
The Christian persecution complex is so strong and so stupid. It's like you are, in fact, the majority, and like all anybody. First of all, we have the separation of church and state. You can do a stupid faith if you want to, and you can be a part of what you want to do because you believe a book from 2,000 years ago should be taken literally, except for when you don't want it to be taken literally. When other people try to take it literally to prove why you probably shouldn't take it literally, you tell us we're all taking it out of context. And then we don't know anything and we're stupid and big fat dum-dums. And we've never thought about anything, and we never learned about God, and we never learned about church, and we're in fact just like, again, big stupid dum-dums. I'm trying to find this one atheist. This guy is so infuriating.
Here's the deception of atheism. Atheists want to tell me that for my Christian beliefs, I'm wrong. Here's the problem. Atheists don't believe in an absolute standard of truth. They believe that it's subjective. Therefore, they can't tell me I'm wrong for doing or believing anything. They can disagree with it, but they can't ever say that I'm wrong. So the best that an atheist can ever be is just not sure.
This really bothers me. And this guy has 2 videos, and all of them are like, I'll show you the other one, but I want to talk about this. So when he says that atheists don't believe in an absolute standard of truth, what I think he's trying to say is this concept of social constructivism. So social constructivism is this idea that nothing can really, I mean, if you draw it all the way out, right? At its very base value, everything exists because humans say it exists. And there are concepts and separations that we make that aren't there, and therefore there is no inherent truth. Now, I think I believe that to most extents, although to me, regardless of if like humans are there or not, the world and things would exist, we would call them differently and they would maybe perceive differently, but they exist with or without us. It's not us who brings, it's not humanity who brings reality into existence, right? What I think he's saying is that atheists don't believe in inherent truths. And he elaborates this a little bit in another video where he believes we believe in morality by consensus. What I mean by we don't believe in inherent truths are there are some things that are not real, like the concept of time or the concept of gender, femininity and masculinity, and even the concept of race to some extent. The concepts that they represent in our society today are not inherent truths. So time didn't have to be organized the way that it was organized. It didn't have to mean what it means to us. And we could have done it a number of other ways, but we have chosen to do it the way that we are currently doing it. And it 1000% affects all of our reality. The same thing with something like femininity and masculinity. It is not inherently true that men like trucks and girls like dolls. It's not inherently true that women are more emotional than men. It's not inherently true that pink is a girl color and blue is a boy color, because all that's stupid. But they are things that 1000% affect our reality. I'm also going to talk about, I think, how people have different perceptions of reality. And of course that's true, because anytime you have a human interaction with another person, you are adding your own perceptions to it, because you grew up in the society that you did, with your experiences, with your understanding of the world, and you bring that to every interaction you have. There is, of course, an objective truth to how an interaction happened, probably done by a third party who's not emotionally invested in it. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. And absolutely, atheists can tell you if you're doing something wrong, because we do believe in some sort of truth, and we do believe in not being a jackass of a human being, which I know that you are, dude, because I'm going to watch your next video. I'm going to show everybody.
Today, when I spoke with a gentleman who had private messaged me and said, you know, I hear what you're saying, but I think you're being a little too harsh on atheists and people who are like maybe homosexual or something like that. First off, I want to specify, I love these people so dearly, and I wouldn't be sharing this information if I didn't. I do all this because I care about them. But he said to me, I quoted some scriptures to him and said, what are your thoughts on these scriptures? And his response to me was, I don't believe that the book of Romans is God's word, because God was brought to tears the other day when...
That's the entire video. He doesn't say why he was brought to tears. He just puts it out there that he does all this out of love. And this is how we get like abusive, gaslighting relationships, is that like the church, and the church that this man is a part of, definitely like an evangelical, non-denominational BS, has taught him that this is an okay way to get people to interact, is just tell people that they're absolutely wrong, you're absolutely right, you have the truth, they need to follow you. He has one more video that I've had recorded that I wanted to show for a long time, so hopefully this is it.
Moral compass, an absolute standard of truth, so you can do whatever you want, nobody can tell you you're wrong. And not to mention, Christianity has absolutely nothing to do with having fun. It doesn't mean you can't have fun, but it has nothing to do with you having fun. Jesus was homeless, jobless, murdered. 11 of the 12 disciples, homeless, jobless, murdered. One thing I often hear atheists say is, you know, ever since I gave up Christianity, my life has been more fun. I've gotten to have a lot more freedoms and enjoy more things. I don't disagree with that whatsoever. I agree 100%. You get to do more things and you get to have way more fun. You have no moral compass, an absolute standard of truth.
Dude, fuck you. You have no moral compass. This isn't even the video I wanted to show you guys. So, but like, listen to this. Listen to that belief system of you leave Christianity because you want to go do stuff. Not because you have questions, not because you're concerned with empathy for other people, not because nobody has answered your questions. I don't do anything more now than I did or didn't do when I was a Christian. Like I said, we've established my belief system. You're just not constantly indoctrinating yourself, right? I don't do anything more or less than I did when I was a Christian. I just don't. It's not that I have more fun. In fact, I feel more uncertain about a lot of stuff. I feel like personally, death that isn't necessarily related to me hits me harder because I don't have easy answers. I don't necessarily feel like I'm having more or less fun since I gave up Christianity, gave it up because, and I didn't give it up because I wanted to go do more things. I spent 8 years and I'm still on this journey feeling uncertain, unsure, and seeing holes that I was told were just wrong to feel. And when I was in my own faith growing up, it was like, it's okay to feel them, but you still have your faith. And when I asked other people about their faiths, they were just mad at me because I had these questions or because I just was poking holes in something. And I never got answers to the questions that were satisfying. I tried. I was there. I went to church. I did all the things. I honestly probably feel less satisfied with the answers and what I think is going to happen when I die now than I did when I was a Christian, but I feel more like what I know now is the truth. And to be honest with you, feelings are not facts. And so maybe in 6 months or 10 years, I'll feel differently. But don't boil it down to the fact that I wanted to have more fun. And other people leave religion, they have to ostracize themselves from their entire family, but they feel that their understanding of the truth is more important than making the people around them comfortable. I don't understand. I don't understand how you can talk about how Jesus was homeless, jobless, and murdered and still use the rhetoric that you think is true and hurting other people. I don't understand how you can lack so much compassion. I really don't. And it doesn't feel like, didn't you just say you love us? I don't feel like you love me. I feel like you're committed to misunderstanding me. You say that I don't have any moral compass too, which is like really interesting because this is the last video I'm going to show you guys. I'm so sorry. This is the same man. Remember, I have no moral compass. Remember, he loves me and he's doing this all so that we can understand. So tell me how you feel.
Proving God's existence in 60 seconds or less, part something. I don't know what we're on right now. So many atheists will give the objection to the morality argument. If you haven't heard it, go to my 1.5 million view video and then go 2 videos after that and you'll see the video. But the argument is, well, Cody, morality is not from God, but it is just a morality by consensus. If enough people agree on the fact that it's morality, we all know it's wrong and it's just going to be fine then. Well, that logic makes no sense because it makes sense for little things. Proving.
Okay, again, I cannot stress to you enough that these are the whole videos. So first of all, he has not proved that God is real. And I watched the other 3 videos in this series. He doesn't ever do it, and he spends so much of the intro time talking about how he has a 1.5 million view video where he proves God is real. And again, and to quote a Drew Gooden reference, if you have done something that nobody has ever done before and nobody has done after, people will fucking notice you. When Jay Station was gonna resurrect his fucking ex-girlfriend, right? I don't understand it. I genuinely don't understand it. But morality by consensus, why is that bad? Why is the understanding of morality coming from the group of people that we all exist with in society, in community? Why would that be bad? Because also, what he has just admitted to us is if he doesn't feel that God has told him that it's immoral, he will do it. And we've seen hurt people and deny people life-saving services and will not help Flint, Michigan, and don't support the Black Lives Matter movement and don't do any of this stuff because they heard it from God. This man is telling us that his moral compass comes from God, but he doesn't believe in any of these other things, but he loves atheists and he loves us and he's just doing this to educate us. And that our understanding of morality is not true and we have no direct understanding of truth, which is again not true, but also like truth can change and our understanding of our interactions with the world can change. And it's pretty upsetting. I mean, that's it. And now it's stuff like this that make me want, like, I think it's stuff when I see influencers like this, people like this, trying to make these points that don't mean anything. I also want to let you know, and this is just like a separate thing, I had to like unfollow this person because it used to make me very upset, but his wife is also pretty religious and makes all of these like, she has like courses and stuff on like biblical womanhood, whatever. I think it is so funny that in all of his posts, he will tag her by making the @ sign and then making a space and then putting her username so she's not linked in anything. You're a jackass, dude. I just want to let you know that. You're a jackass. That's your fucking wife. And you can't even tag her in an Instagram post? Anyways, I didn't mean to get so angry. I talked about how calm, especially Zelph on the Shelf. I know everybody is on their own path and is on their own journey, but I hope I did something concise. I just think for me at some point, the mental gymnastics of trying to validate my own religion that I grew up with that didn't harm me, but probably harmed other people. I might be looking back on my childhood with rose-colored glasses, and I just couldn't do the mental gymnastics anymore. And that's why I felt the way that I felt. And that's why I left it. Not because I wanted to go do drugs and go have sex and drugs and rock and roll. Not because I'm a bad person. Not because I'm having more fun. Not because this is easier. It's not easier. But because I can see the pain that the church has caused. And lots of different churches have caused lots of people. And I will not stand by and listen to it. I won't do it. So. Subscribe, like the video. Comment.